Lupat episode 29. It is a clip show. That is all you really need to know. Keiichiro loses his memories, they go through clips of the previous parts of the series to get it back. There is no character development, there is no character advancement. It is basically worthless as an episode, aside from seeing Keiichiro equip one of the arms from the robots on his normal-sized self. It is completely a worthless episode, as most clip shows tend to be. We don't even get new character information about them, or them realizing or learning something, as is supposed to be the entire point of the clip show. My roommates are next to me because it's the finale of Build. We have been watching it together, and we all have some thoughts.
So, shall we begin the experiment?
Yeah, recap for this one. Since Banjo is stuck in the space between spaces alongside Evolt, Sento goes in to rescue him, resulting in one final brawl with Evolt, which finally Rabbit Tank and all of Sento's lesser forms finally work against the guy, simply because his power is actively being both drained by the hole, which is supposed to power the world fusion, and because Evolt refused with Banjo, and Banjo this time is conscious of that, so he can fight back against that and restrain Evolt's power so Sento can actually win. This one finally allowing the premiere of Rabbit Dragon form, which has been teased for a very long time, and it's all CGI, as all he does is form it and then kick, and it's like, it's not even on screen for 30 seconds, so I don't even know what the point is, since we already got Build Cross Z in the movie, which clearly that was what those items were even supposed to represent, along with, continuing showcasing why Ryuga and Sento are their own best match as people, which, people have been flagging me on Twitter and Tumblr for the, somehow this has become my meme, damn it, everything is gay about this. Yeah, I didn't get that from these two. I really did not, because overall, the character work for Build has been really weak. Like, I even said through the first half of the show that Banjo had pretty much no role in the story, so it's like, it's not something that's built on every episode. Build was kind of terrible with building character arcs and development, ironically enough. So, yeah, I don't feel it's validated to even do that meme, as honestly, I didn't see it. But regardless, Sento wins, Evolt is destroyed, assumedly. The worlds are fused, with Sento somehow waking up with the Cross Z Ride Watch in his hand. He finds that everybody is living out peaceful lives with the memories suppressed of the other world, but not completely gone, which, okay, I hated the way Lightning Returns handled that. They basically had a send all of these tortured souls to this new world where they will take over and possess and subsume the bodies of their counterparts on that world, which, yeah, that was pretty damn horrific. So this is definitely better in comparison, where it's just allowing them to live out the lives they would have had the last 10 years not happened, with some of them being able to retain their memories on a subconscious level, which it shows that they could recover them and come to terms with them, but you shouldn't force them to do it simply because, a lot of tragedy happened through that and they're living happier lives now. And the show wraps up with Sento finding Ryuga, who is somehow not alive here. Presumably it's because of Sento saving him, and they begin to recap the series in a last fourth wall break for it, where Sento has divided the events of the series into 49 episodes, and this basically wraps around and explains the previous line segments as them recapping their own personal journey. Honestly, I feel this is one of the best ways they could have gone out, considering the whole world fusion plot device and the events of the series, because a lot of people died, and there were only so many ways after you gave Evolt black hole manipulation powers that things wouldn't go completely off the rails. You'd either have a world that was devastated down to the dregs because Sento and his father were ultimately allowed Evolt to gain all of this power because they rebuilt all of his equipment. Or you make things in a way so that the hero saves everyone, and those actions were just the manipulations of a villain in that they couldn't find the way to supersede him, even though the point of the series was to be a genius outsmarting the opposition he goes against, and that's the problem. He really doesn't seem to ever really outsmart or outpace Evolt. The one time he did was when he converted the Pandora panel into a self-destruct button before that was eventually developed into the Genius Bottle. And even that didn't work because Evolt just swapped bodies.
Yeah, like, Evolt's major problem throughout the entirety of the show has been he never actually suffers a crushing defeat that keeps him on his toes. At a point, like, early in the show when he was still a scheming Blood Stark guy, or Stark, yeah, Blood Stark, it was like the evil alien manipulating things behind the scenes, but at the halfway point, he shifts from that to I'm winning because the plot says I can win. You know what I mean? Like,
he was basically Eisening it, in a way. It's kind of like everything according to Keikaku. This is my it's like my sudden seeming defeat was all part of my master plan all along. Wahaha. Does the Dr. Evil.
He basically can do anything, and the plot just lets him. And if you're not aware, that's the problem we've had with Super Sentai the last several years, with a mix of its protagonists and antagonists. The plot doesn't hold him accountable for the limitations that should be imposed upon them. Worse, Evolt's final big plan to devour the universe, that was Donna Margay's plan. And Donna Margay pulled that off just as, if not more stupidly.
it's like
There's no understanding of why he would want to consume the world, because it doesn't seem like he's much of a creator of anything. His powers allow him to divide his own essence to create minions, but they're still him.
Like, dude, what happened all those years ago that made you want to go from conquering and eating worlds to I'm going to destroy everything? There's like a missing step there, like some sort of backstory piece that we were not allowed to see at all.
Where did you originate from? What originally created your powers? Do you like pina coladas?
This overall comes to my biggest problem with Build, if I may. Like, my big problem with Build overall, it tries to be a grand epic, but it doesn't understand that a grand epic still needs rules and limitations. You can't just go full big. And Evolt doesn't even work to me as an Eldritch Abomination, because the point of an Eldritch Abomination like Cthulhu or Dagon or anything in the Lovecraftian mythos is that they are too grand and big for humanity to understand. Their only main motivation is hunger. That's it. They look upon us as food. Evolt should look upon humanity as food if that's his big thing with devouring planets, but then his motivations keep changing. At one point, I thought he was just going to turn the whole world into smashes or some crap.
Yeah, bioform the planet to be like him, because then he wouldn't feel alone and isolated. Hell, I was expecting something more Thanos-like with his claim for ultimate power.
Right.
But there's nothing like that here. It just drops that. It's like it never even happened. It's like someone had the idea, it made it into the script, and then they're like, no, we're just forget that. We're just going back to the whole wipes out the world plan. Like, just wiping out the world isn't a big thing for a villain. Some villains, you need to have a deeper, like, a slightly deeper motivation to justify this kind of thing. What does he want? Who is Evolt? What is the point of all this?
And honestly, we've been discussing about this, like, off camera for quite a while, but I really thought, for the longest time, that Evolve was going to be like a secondary antagonist for a little bit, and then he was going to get his ass kicked, and then suddenly Nama Heavy Industries takes the center stage as like the primary antagonist because, like, sure, alien space monsters that eat people, that's scary, but what's even more scary, guys? Like
capitalists and war profiteers getting that power.
Right, like and Naba was like, I thought he has his own little Hitler Youth private army thing going on, and I thought they were going somewhere with that. Like, this is like, if Shinta was doing experimenting and building stuff for the sake of humanity because he's just that cool of a guy, then Namba would have been like, hey, we're just gonna, do this stuff because we just like seeing pain. You know what I mean?
The fact is, I honestly think they should have just stuck with the war arc. That should have been the main plot. No giant aliens, no big black holes. They were building up the war from the first episode with the 3 factions. They were building that up, and honestly, they should have kept with it. Yeah, it went on for too long, but you know what? I was more invested in that than I was with Evolve. I was invested with the three crows. I was invested with how the characters were being put through the paces. How Kamen Riders, protectors of the innocent, were being turned into soldiers for war. Something like that was basically done in Kamen Rider Gaim in a way with the
beat riders.
With the beat riders. And you know what? This could have been better on a grander scale with Bloodstark being like cut out Evolved entirely. Just have Bloodstark be a psychopath scientist that is the opposite of Kiryu in terms of motivation.
Or just, kept with the I'm forgetting his name because he's been out of the show for so long. So keep him Isurugi. Keep Isurugi being the corrupted astronaut who saw this grand vision of the dynasty of Mars and putting into motion all these things with the Pandora boxes opening to bioform, like I keep saying, the bioforming, terraforming devices that originally seemed like it would be, to recreate that with its own king. That would have actually been a compromise with the Bloodstark manipulations, as then he could have built, not so much built, but enabled Namba to develop things to that point. You still get Kamen Rider Evil and his full powers out of that, but as a world conqueror, hell, you could still keep Evolt in the show possessing or manipulating Isurugi to rebuild his empire upon Earth. That seemed like a better plot and would more validate Bernage's part in this as the queen that was rebelling against her corrupted husband, and that would also explain why she was giving up the full bottles. The full bottles were like simultaneously the means by which to claim this power, but also to a defense against its use, because she, a chosen hero, would rise to use them. To go back to the .hack Aura quote, I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but I'm paraphrasing, this device can bring about destruction or salvation at the whim of the user. That's where we thought it was going with Build, and honestly, we're all pretty much disappointed because the world conquest, the intergalactic world conquest monster from beyond space, yeah, Kyoryuger did this better. You know, the show the Western fandom constantly shits on for stupid reasons.
And to add on to that, with Kyoryuger, it's a Sentai, which is a task force, going up against an armada of world-conquering, devouring monsters versus Build, which is just one man, or several people against, Evolt, and yet Evolt, I don't feel like they justify his existence at all. Like, where did he come from? Galactus gets an origin story. Every world-devouring Unicron, all the world devourers I've ever seen in fiction have some justified reason in universe as to how they came to be. You can't just write in your story, oh, and there's this guy over here that eats planets for no reason. Why are you eating planets? Do you just do it for funsies? Do you get nutrients from that? What the hell, man?
And like I said, it's the same problem with Dono Marge from Q Ranger. They care so little about backstory and development of them as a villain, despite their ever-presence as part of the plot, that you ultimately feel like it's a waste. as opposed to Kyoryuger, where they actually did flesh that out through the proxy of all of his minions trying to revive him. D-Boss was not a main character in the series. He was the end boss who was seeking to be revived to continue this task it was given by its master. The master is immaterial, but you understand his motivations as a servant to someone he believes is better, and the real thrust and focus is on his minions, who end up as developed characters throughout. And that we don't get that with Build. We didn't get that with Q Ranger.
And to say some good things about the show for a little bit, like as somebody who actually moved here at up here with Davis at the beginning of the year, Build meant something to me in the early days because of how it really truly did have this feeling of like every episode was building upon something. Like when Revelations happened, they never canceled out what you've seen before. They just reframed the context in which they happened, and like it felt something special for a little bit. But and like I know you have your problems with Banjo, and I do agree with you.
Yeah, he definitely could have been used better in the early half of the show.
I definitely agree with you there, but I personally like the guy. Like I plan on actually picking up the Cross Sea Dragon at some point because I kind of dig what they were going for and stuff. And I feel like in the early days that Sento and Banjo really did have like a good dynamic going on. Like I would like to believe that the actors had like a good working relationship off the screen. And if it really wasn't for the typical trappings of a collectathon series where you get a new form debuting every single episode, which the early forms looked cool and all, but let's be real, guys. I'd rather take a double style form thing going on than introduce a thing like every single episode. It's like if they're jingling keys in front of my face.
Yeah, I really feel that O's is unfortunately the archetype of where people thought wrong of that. As really, they only had 15 of those coins, and the cleverness of the series was he could only use certain forms at certain times because the coins required to create those forms would shift hands throughout the show. It was very well plotted to balance things out in that regard.
Right. With O's, it was always like a shift in power, basically. Like I got annoyed at first because I'm like, come on, you can use Tajador whenever you want, but then I realized, but if he could do that, then you get yourself a boring show where you ask the question, why doesn't he just whip out the big guns every single time? And
whereas here, you a lot of the time don't know which bottles are where once the work begins, and why he doesn't have access to forms you think he should, and by the point that Hazard comes in, you see most of them less, and by the introduction of Rabbit Tank Tank, most of the rest of them disappear for all of the rest of the show. I mean, you can count on the times he went into a form that wasn't Rabbit, Tank Tank, Hazard, or Genius on one hand.
And honestly, another big problem was with O's, despite the fact that O's, as a writer, can access over 1,000 different combinations because he's a literal army of one, Build has 60 full bottles. Now, for those who are familiar with the Collectathon gimmick, try keeping track of 60 of anything in a show that runs over the course of a year, and like at a point it really did become a guessing game. It, like you said, is who had what at what time, and at some point you just give up because the show was like, we're not going to show those forms anymore because it's all about the Rabbit Tank Tank, and those forms are cool and all, but do what's even cooler, the fact that Gorilla Diamond can turn projectiles into Diamond. Isn't that a cool power?
Yes!
That's a very cool power. And he has a monkey piston punching.
Hell, you didn't even need Super and Final forms. You just needed Sento best matching all of the form combinations to create combinations that would overcome the obstacles of the moment. That's why Double was cool, that's why O's was cool, and that's why Force's modules were cool, because between them, they've emphasized versatility over sheer power.
Right, and what made the writer overcome all the obstacles at the end of the day was their ability to think on their feet and go, oh, this combination can do this specific thing, which can easily counter this guy, because I'm not exactly stronger than this guy at the moment, but I can outthink this guy. You know what I mean?
Now, yeah, Namba and Evolts eventually took in analysis data, seeming to counter all of those abilities, but the problem with that is, even if you have the data to counter those forms, it's not like you're always going to have the ability to actually counter them just from a single power set. Even when they were in the war arc with Gentoku as Rogue in that final battle and him countering Rabbit with Diamond, it's like, we didn't even know he had Diamond.
Like, when did you get that?
And Diamond isn't a specific... Diamond's power is so specific that it doesn't matter what Sento would have been using, it would have been good against pretty much any of them unless it had the force to break through it, which was Tank. And so it seems like, oh, we have this secret weapon to counter this form that we have the analysis data on. And like, dude, you didn't need the analysis data. You could have guessed that any higher power tier weapon would have been able to be countered by Diamond because it's freaking Diamond.
Yeah, it's freaking Diamond. And I want to say some more positive stuff. But despite all the bullshit that was going on in the later half of the show, I truly believe that we have some good actors in this show, because
they're all,
like, the crowning moment for me that made me realize that Sento's actor was going to be doing some good things in the future was right around when the war arc was just really starting and he had access to Hazard form, when he goes crazy in that form and accidentally kills one of the three crows who are Kazumi's best friends, and just the aftershock, he's like stunned. He's like, what did I just do? You know what I mean?
He's left in shock for a full week.
Right, like, the acting on display, it's not the best I've ever seen in Kamen Rider, but I definitely think these actors are going places. Like, but to go off on that, but the second half of the show commits one big sin that really pisses me off, which is character development that comes right out of left field. And I'm not just saying out of nowhere. I just mean like a ball, like you're playing baseball and then a football comes and hits you in the face. You're like, what? And what I'm talking about is, why did Gentoku devolve into a giant beam?
Can I take the rant on this?
You absolutely can, my friend.
I'm gonna say it. Gentoku was my favorite character in the whole thing because his development from bad guy to Kamen Rider, I think, was well handled. But honestly, I wish they had developed that stupid thing with the memes more. Like, maybe have it revealed that he's just acting like goofball because he is unable to, like, at one point, Gentoku's father dies. And maybe have this be like, it's just him living in complete denial of his grief for his death. Like, have him be, like, have it finally, like, like, he's wearing a facade of stupid clothes to direct attention away from the fact that he's not really reacting well to his dad's death. He's not really, like, processing it well. And honestly, this pissed me off because I think he had the best... His actor was probably the best one, in my opinion. I think he was good at fun... Because the meme stuff was stupid, but he was still committed wholeheartedly to his dumb clothing. Like, he could wear stupid clothing with a straight face, and he could sell it. It's like Leslie Nielsen doing comedy. A serious actor doing comedic bits. Sure, the comedy bits weren't funny, but he was still trying to sell it. And honestly, he had the best... I liked his chemistry with Kazumi more than Banjo and Sento. They actually had, like, they were former enemies turned reluctant allies, and actually, like, maybe develop that friendship. Maybe, like, hell, I actually thought he and Sawa might actually have a thing. I don't know. They didn't do anything with him beyond the jokes, and that pissed me off because you have good setup for a guy who does terrible shit in the beginning of it. By all rights, he is a villain. And then he realizes exactly what he's been doing wrong. And that being a Kamen Rider was... I like the idea, by the way, that the Kamen Rider system, the Rider system, was slowly excising what happened to him with the nebula gas thing. Like
Not the nebula gas, the Pandora
Pandora's-
box light.
the Pandora box light.
And it wasn't so much that, but a hazard level of 3 or higher basically act as a counter-agent against that mental manipulation or mental mind-screwing, mind-diddling that happened with that light. It's why Katsuragi went from being the demon scientist back to having the revelation of, what have I done? I have to stop this.
Yeah. So this honestly pissed me off the more. Like, Build had so much potential for good. It had so much potential to be like a grand finale for the Neo Heisei era. Now that Gio's coming up, and technically the Heisei era is done.
The Emperor Heisei is moving towards retirement. Yeah.
So this could have been like a great idea. A villain redemption arc with the whole "what have I done" scenario. Him realizing that everything has happened has been partly because of him and Evolt, and he works hard to change that. And this could have been a great idea, because I like a good redemption arc when it's done right. This could have been done right. Gentoku could have been the best character in the whole show. He could have been what Terui in Double was, right?
Yeah, Terui had the best character arc in the show, and Gentoku could easily have recreated it, but I think the big problem is that the writer for the show, I don't think, is the best with characters, and that would explain why character development kind of stagnates about halfway through and is almost non-existent in the last quarter of the show.
It's like Judd Lin from Power Rangers, as was discussed by a former staff writer on Power Rangers. Judd Lin, good with plots, but bad with character development. And
He left that to the other people on the show, apparently, to help to more build that out.
Right.
So this feels like that was the scenario, but people were like, but the thing is, you need better coordination with this if that was the case. I have no idea if this was the case with Build. We'll probably find out in the future. Who knows? But right now, the character development was stagnated. Like, Gentoku turns good. That's it. His character development's over. We get nothing else for him. We get Kazumine had the best development of all of the characters, and he was not one of the main two writers.
You did dirty by Kazumi's show.
Yeah.
Why introduce a final form for him and then he suddenly dies? Like, what the hell?
That was possibly the biggest middle finger to his character, and he was the second best right after Gentoku, in my opinion.
Also, can we also say that Kazumi's actor is amazing?
He was a great actor.
I would love to go to a bar with that guy, just to, not for the memes, but just because of how much energy he puts into everything.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe he's not like that off script, just like he's just a normal guy. But he committed 110%. All the jokes that were funny, most of them came from him.
Although it probably helps that he's the big veteran, since he was also
Kurenai Otoya from
Kurenai from Kiva. Yeah, it's like that was 10 years ago. He's pushing 30.
Yeah,
and he doesn't show it in any respect.
No, he's healthy.
He's still got it.
He's hale and hearty. He's not slowing down.
And biggest missed opportunity, his upgraded form wasn't electric based, so he could have greased lightning.
Gentoku's. Gentoku should have been lightning. Elemental.
And I know we've just been penting up all these negative thoughts over the course of the last few weeks or the last several months because
we expected better.
We just expected better. And when you're watching the events time in a show, you kind of want to be returned with greatness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting the entire world.
It could have been average, and I'd be fine with that.
I would just have expected average competency, but the mistakes on display are amateur hour mistakes that no writer should really be making, and it just kind of got my head scratching week for week because I'm going, how are you doing this? Because the final form is useless, actually useless.
It doesn't play into the final episode at all. What was the point of genius form?
You introduce it so late in the show that it means absolutely fucking nothing.
And it doesn't even have the versatility effect that a lot of other powers do, despite it being having powers drawn from and combining all 60 of the full bottles.
Which,
like, I think he uses the power of Diamond as a shield, like, once.
Like, think about that, guys. Like, wrap your mind around that. How is a form that's a combination of 60 powerful bottles of badassery somehow useless in the face of a black hole destroying maniac? Like, I don't get that. It pisses me off because...
And hell, if black hole's the power of destruction, shouldn't that by proxy make Genius the powers of creation? And yet, we don't really see him create anything beyond, of course, the Genius Bottle's power being used to set up and start the world fusion, but that's just fusion, not so much creating something new.
Like, if it was going to be creation, let's just go all in on the busted nature of Final Forms, because if you are dealing with a creature that can generate black holes, I think you are then given the green card to say, hey, my Final Form can create stuff and then kick your ass.
Liner form from Den-O was stronger than Genius. It was more effective than Genius, and it was physically weak. Yet it was more effective, in my opinion.
Oh, and
I know you don't like it too.
I don't like Den-O, but fair enough. Liner form is useless without the Den Kamen Saber, though.
Yeah, true.
But and another thing, just okay. Xa's final form, Hyper Muteki, in my opinion, has been one of the best final forms of the Neo Heisei era from...
But that's in part because Kronos was an effective villain. He kept having all these advantages, and once they dealt with one advantage or negated it or beat it, he had another one to draw upon because Kronos himself was an intelligent, capable villain. That's what made the last third of XA, which was focused all around beating him, actually continue to be engaging. Like, I had a lot of problems with XA over the course of the series, but honestly, on rewatch, we rewatched it recently, I had less problems with it as I now knew where they were going with most of them, and could otherwise have all the video game references they were homaging click a lot more with me as I saw where they're going with them. I still think Hiro Kagami is the weakest character in the show because solely his setup material did not allow them to build properly the resulting arc with the rest of them, but I have less hostility with it at the end of the day. I don't feel I have that with Build because they built a lot of foundation in the early side of the show, and it felt like they didn't really go anywhere with it.
It was like they were a bunch of contractors that were hired to, build a house, but instead they spent like 25 episodes just twiddling their thumbs until the finale was approaching, and they went like, oh crap, we gotta do something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I still think the finale's good on, for a wrap-up level, but everything up to that, I don't think was worth it. And I'm saying, and to quote Charles Sonnenberg, and I'm saying this about Kamen Rider Build and the other show, and Lupat, I wish you were as good as I know you could have been.
Because there's so much potential in the story engines, and they're not using them, or they don't end up getting them. And we don't even know why it was diverted so, is they seem to be building better material for this, and then suddenly you get, it's like aliens.
Aliens. But, honestly, Heisei Generations Final, to me, was probably the last time when everything was working as intended. You know what I mean?
It really was, in my opinion. Heisei Generations.
After that movie finished, its run, that's right around when the show really started going downhill into Stupidville
And of course, we have the problem of Ryuga Banjo having the greatest character moments and development for him in that movie. And while that's good to tie the movies better in part of the main storyline so people can stop thinking, oh, they're not canon, the additional problem is that you should not need supplementary material to understand the developments in the main story. Like, when XA did this with Heisei Generations in discovering that Emu Hojo was patient zero for the Bugster virus and ultimately responsible through him being host to its cultivation of all these other Bugster incidents. Yeah, that was first explained in the movie, but that was then addressed on in the main series, so you did not exactly require that movie to understand those lore developments and any character actions which would result from them. They were worthless, they didn't matter to the show, but the show looped back on itself to also address those points in its main narrative.
Right,
You could, if you missed the movie, you weren't missing anything. Whereas with Heisei Generation's final and Banjo's development, you have this sudden disconnect that is also part of my issues with Banjo early on in the show and him having no identity and purpose, because suddenly he's acting different and you don't see why.
Yeah, I mean, I really do like the guy, but I will agree that, if you need a movie to explain what's going on with a character, you're kind of doing it wrong, because you can't assume that everybody's going to rush out to the theater to see this movie.
Western fans, we need to wait until the movie is fully subbed and translated before we can even see it. And we have to wait till it comes out in home video for that to happen.
Which is months later, yeah.
Right, and...
So, how do you think we feel?
Yeah, and Toei is having lagging audience involvement in their theaters for a while now, because a lot of their movies have been terrible. A case in point, I just read an article earlier that One Piece episode of Skypiea, the recap movie for the Skypiea arc of One Piece, years down the line, was actually in fact terrible. And because
it was? No.
Yeah, because it betrayed the spirit of the original.
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
Yeah, and Toei has been doing these fuck-ups in smaller ways, but they become bigger and bigger as the years have gone by, and I can't help but direct it at the same source that Shinichiro Shirakura, the smeghead that should not have his position, is in charge of a lot of these, and you've pretty much seen Toei constantly burn its bridges over the last 6 years. Not to say that they haven't made good content in that time. There are still a lot of good things they make, but more and more of the fandoms for what they make have been getting really pissed at them. Digimon, Super Sentai, certain Kamen entries, specifically with Ghost and Amazon.
And hell, I'm gonna say something controversial, or I think I'm gonna be disagreed upon. Toei kind of fucked over Dragon Ball in a weird way with the direction of the Universal Survival arc, because I thought that arc ended strongly, but I think there were several things they could have done a lot better to make the narrative.
Yeah, and that's another one. People, when looking back on Super or Dragon Ball Super, are finding they don't really like Super either.
Sure, it has its good elements to it, and there's certainly things in there that make it better than GT, in my opinion, but
the best episodes of the series
don't occur until after,
have nothing to do with the main story arcs of the series. It's all in the filler content, focused on characters we didn't get the attention with before.
Right, and just the way the Universal Survival, arc played out, characters were getting knocked down and things were happening that people were like, okay, this is awesome, but it would have been more awesome if say, Krillin didn't get cheap shotted out, within the first 2 seconds, you know what I mean? I wish I'm kind of miffed about that, he literally gets, anyway, that's a different story.
That's the story for another time.
Yeah, but...
A story we're probably never going to tell, because I doubt we're ever going to really marathon Super.
We might, actually, considering we're going to put anime stuff in the mix. We could do an entirety Dragon Ball Z,
it would be
Dragon
nice.
Ball Super
Can we
thing.
Can we skip the arcs?
We can watch the movie versions. We can watch the movie versions.
Oh, thank you, God.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. But just, at the end of the day, if I had to, I know, ranking things or, putting numbers on shows isn't exactly the most advanced form of criticism, but the only thing that pops into my head as to how I make sense of Bill as a whole, it's a solid 7 out of 10, or for me, just so... And the reason I say that is because I can't deny the good feelings I had from the early half of the show, and I do think that the early side of Build is something that at least needs to be checked out, not fully invested in, but at least watch tidbits here and there, because there was some solid stuff that goes down with the foreshadowing and the building up of the plot events. But the fact that the later half just after the war arc just devolves into crazy town with these plot revelations and dumb evil father plots that go nowhere, I can't help but say to myself, 7 out of 10, you could skip this series entirely and you really
wouldn't lose anything. A lot of people I've been seeing online have been saying, this was the best Kamen series, and I'm like, did you pay attention or watch most of them? Because I pretty much watched all of them right now, and this is not a top 5 series. This is not a top 1 series. This is not a top 10 series. Because it loses the plot so badly.
It really does. You have no idea how bad it loses the plot.
And I really feel that if you thought back on the show, that it would lose a lot of this goodwill. And unfortunately, I see this annually. Okay, we didn't see it with Ghost, but we saw it with Wizard, we saw it with Gaim, we saw it with, actually we didn't see it with Drive. Drive's actually gotten a more positive reconsideration.
Drive's like that weird.
And Gaim's lost his fans or something?
Gaim had a lot more reconsideration, although there was a fandom divide over Gaim originally because of, one, religious fundamentalism, thinking the whole forbidden fruit thing was being insulting towards Christianity, when the forbidden fruit thing did not exactly originate from Christianity. And the second one was because the TV Nihon alternative was really so bad at their translation that they played revisionist interpretation with most of the series, so a lot of people were getting a different bend than was intended by the series on that. So, and basically, a lot of people had to then reevaluate Gaim's merits on that. And like I said, it was originally said to be the big rival for Black. It was not.
It was.
And that's a lot of things about this, that what people say are the best series. Have you tried rewatching them? Like, even as we're being really negative to Build, we're probably going to be more positive to it on a rewatch outside of the later half of the show, where we realize in Marathon Fodder there's likely more chance of them just getting frustrated because we really do feel it lost the plot and it just kept spinning in circles.
Right, and also I feel like some shows become different upon a rewatch in a marathon format versus week by week, because week by week this had to have been very frustrating for viewers. Like, if we're being frustrated, can you imagine what it's like for a kid in Japan to be watching this and then going, like, but
because we've seen the ratings reports, Lupin Ranger versus Patranger, which we've consistently thought has been terrible or using the material terrible, has been outrating it by a fair margin. It's like rating it as one of the lowest rated Kamen Rider series out there. And it mainly saw the drop when the war arc started. And that's, as we keep saying, where the quality of the storytelling also took a simultaneous downturn. And Toei's not going to pay attention for this, because Build's actually had some really strong sales due to the full bottle gimmick. But as I've also said elsewhere, when addressing Ninja and Q-Ranger's terrible sales, a large toy line does not indicate well the reception, because if you have few people watching, then you have fewer people buying more things, not more people buying more things, which it should, which a smaller toy line, higher ratings and reception series actually showcases to be better, like Ju-Oger, or, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Go Busters had that. Hell, Gokaiger and Kyoryuger had comparable sized toy lines to what Q-Ranger did, and they both broke 10 billion yen in sales by multiple billions over that level, whereas Q-Ranger barely broke 9 for the same size toy line, and in fact more expensive toys per sale item. So that doesn't reflect well a positively received series, and Build has had that same kind of reception. So it's not just us and being pedantic and negative for the sake of being pedantic and negative. No, the numbers kind of back us up on this.
Yeah, and, I'll let John have the floor after this real quick, but believe me when I say this from the bottom of my heart, guys, it hurts for me to admit that Bill lost the plot and became, like, bad, because I really, honestly enjoy the show in its early run. I know I keep saying this throughout the course of this thing, but I wanted to drive the point home that it really did make me feel good that even after making a big change in my life, that the things that I like were still doing good things. And then to see all that potential, all that goodwill go, vanish, and not just vanish instantly, just, it was like grinding erosion or some, I don't know, but point is, it hurts to, sometimes you just gotta look at the things you like and say, hey, I like you as a whole franchise, but you're doing something really stupid right now, and it sucks,
And we're likely to have that response to Geo, simply considering who's on that and the information they've already received.
Yeah.
We could totally be wrong on that. We're recording this on Saturday. It's premiering tonight. Fan subs will be up in a few days, but yeah, there's, like, first couple episodes, if I hit my limit on stupid or irritation at these characters, which him shouting, I'm gonna be the king, is likely going to drive me up the wall on that, considering how better that was handled with Kyoryuger and Daigo Kiryu, and it really was. Please watch my Kyoryuger videos when I finally managed to get them back up because of the Toei Content ID claims. It's like, Kamen Rider should not try to be kings. That's not the kind of hero archetype they're going for. They usually don't work when they try the whole king's journey thing. So, honestly, first couple episodes, if I hit my limit, I'm skipping the series, and I'm dropping Lupat at the same time, because no point in going with a series I also dislike if the only other tying one is going to give birth to the same kind of irritation.
Like, I'll still keep watching Lupat, but, John, do you have some thoughts?
I admit I'm more of a newcomer to Tokusatsu relatively compared to these guys. In fact, it's because of these guys that I really got into Tokusatsu. I more enjoy Kamen Rider as a whole because I feel, compared to Sentai, they have an overall stronger grasp of story. I can enjoy monsters fighting, mindless fighting, and I can find that in Sentai. But if I want fighting monsters in awesome suits with awesome powers while having a strong story, I usually turn to Kamen Rider for that. And Build disappoints me on this. I dislike Lupat far more than I do Build in the end of the day, because Build has strong first half, as Matt says, and I still think the cast is overall great, and I like a lot of the characters. I don't have that with Lupat because, honestly, Lupat squandered the biggest potential for a really good Sentai that it could have, but that's a whole other story. Overall, yeah. I'm going to say this, Build, I'm not angry. I'm just very disappointed. And in my opinion, that's worse.
Yep.
We're kind of getting an odd relation with this. 10 years ago, this kind of had the same sort of arc. Den-O is the big, popular one, even though it has flaws people ignore. Kiba's the lackluster one because people say it lost the plot. And then Decade is the one that drove the fanbase crazy because it seemed to disrespect the previous series it was directly calling up and homaging. We're kind of seeing the same thing with X-Aid, Build, and potentially Geo. Though X-Aid, I personally feel, has fewer problems than Den-O did, but it still has problems in certain aspects of its character and story, which they could have done better on. Any series could have done better, and has a few flaws it could have shored up. That'll differ from person to person, but it's strange we have this relationship between them.
Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah, and in the end, X-Aid had an overall stronger story. I mean, it was flawed, yeah.
Poppy is best girl.
Poppy is best girl.
Poppy is best girl, indeed. But overall, it's still great. I still think it's great. Definitely in top 10 writers. had a better villain, better cast of characters,
better memes,
better memes, and overall, I think better powers.
Like, and also
it's video games. I'm a video gamer.
Also, but last thing we'll say about XA for me is, if you want to see a show that has power escalation done pretty darn well, I think XA is a good example to go by, because due to the writer for this guy, the show, what's the name?
Yuya Takahashi.
Yeah, Yuya Takahashi. This guy looked at video games and saw the best of what makes video games great and translated that into the show perfectly, because you start off with the level 1 Genom stuff, then he turns into the more dangerous zombie, you know, and then suddenly, holy crap, there's Parado and his powers, and you're like, things are about to get screwy with the Kamen Rider Chronicle, and just when you thought you were about to be done with this guy,
you realized he was just a mid-boss.
And then tick-tock on the clock and the party don't pause.
Yeah, that was a good succession, whereas here, it's Blood Stark.
It's just one villain, and he's Nani. It's just one villain throughout the entire thing, and it's nothing.
It's not even like a good shonen villain where he's like omnipresent. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's like you expect from the gear that, he's fighting on the level of everybody else early on, and then no, he's fighting on the level of the Superform stuff, and then oh no, he gets his actual power up, and now he's literally unstoppable. It's like there's not a good escalation.
The bot says I win, so I shall win.
Haha. You know, it actually would have been more funny if if the fourth wall break was purposeful, and Evil was holding the writer hostage and making him write all
he's just in his space lobster form holding a gun, and he's like, yeah, you write me as strong as possible.
It's like, wait a minute, I'm about to lose. Quick, bullshit my way out of this! It's like, but I don't want to. I have your family.
Yeah, where I really do think that the tail end of the show would have worked had Evolt not been this space invader, but like we said, the King of Mars, had the fallacies of this collapsed and doomed civilization been inflicted on the current world, and Sento building the future that would defy this encroaching evil, because ultimately Kamen Rider, when you look at all every entry in the franchise as a whole, is about one man's rebellion against a force or order which is trying to make the world go wrong. And that, when you look beyond just the first entry, that's the bigger picture between all of these series, and in fact the larger writings of Shotaro Ishinomori, when you look at those stories as well. Not everybody has it, different series have different ways of showcasing that, but it's still there. Like, you don't have the right to force your own perceptions and dreams upon others to dominate and conquer and consume them. And I don't think Build fails at that. There are definitely those elements to Evolt, but I feel they're less. It's less an emphasized element of this show, since Evolt's just at the end a destroyer, and the destroyer aspects aren't really as done well in Kamen Rider as opposed to other series. So there's another way where we have a thematic conflict, and we're going to have that again in Zeo, because the whole king and emperor thing kind of is a problem there.
We're going to hold on to our butts for that one.
Hold on to our butts for that one.
Oh,
well,
yes, we are.
at the very least...
It's not a top 10 series. It really is not. But
right.
I really am more disappointed at it at the end of the day than actually really angry and hating on it.
Yeah, like, I will agree with that statement.
This is the series that you have dinner with at the end of the day after reading its terrible, terrible school report, and no one talks to each other.
I feel, actually, there's a good example. I feel about this series like most people feel about Wizard, because Wizard kind of had the same thing happen to it.
Yeah, you're not wrong on that.
I'll take your word for it.
But it had more of a, it was less that it had no story, it lost its story arc, but more that it took longer to actually come to a conclusion on that story arc.
Right.
So, because it was meant to be a more back-to-basic series, which was about the monster of the week with a slowly developing main plot. Whereas here, there's main plots and less emphasis or focus on the related subplots, which were required to develop characters. And it also had the problem of characters who matter nothing to the story, which kind of has the build kind of ended up having with Nanba and the Prime Ministers outside of Toto's Prime Minister. So, yeah, there's another parallel there in the quality issues of build, where you could honestly say that Wizard, which is another considered under lower quality in comparison to those around its series.
Now, my final thoughts on the series. I'm pretty sure all of Saito is actually just that one city block that we saw in that one episode, and like there's no other actual countryside. It's just that little section. Everything else is just a devastated wasteland.
Okay, so yeah, not the worst series, not actually terrible, but we really wish the last half of the series had gone differently than it did.
Yep, that's all we can say.
That's pretty much it.
Usually we have the shows that are good to still rewatch and binge. Am I right?
Yeah.
Unless Shinichiro Shirokuro decides to get god powers and erase everything that was good.
And rewrite them to his own revisionist history of them, as has been showcased by multiple movies where he has been browbeating the writer into doing what he wanted, which we have seen that from. So, Anyways, that's it for us. I will be back to doing this solo next week when Zio premieres, and potentially that'll be the end of these vlogs until the Garo Jenga series starts up. Whenever that's supposed to start up, I'm thinking October. But yeah, we'll see how that goes, and I'll see you later.
See ya.
So, yeah.